So this decision could cost me my entire photography career. It's not every day that I could face a decision that could make or break my whole career in photography, but boy, oh boy, this one could be it. Now, fact number one, I'm still living in the DSLR world. I've got two Nikon D750s. Fact number two, I just discovered my old guitar from my childhood and I looked it up online and it could be worth some pretty significant money. Maybe enough money to let me switch to a whole new mirrorless system entirely. Now, uncertainty number one. Exactly how much the guitar sells for completely changes what even camera brand that I can buy my way into. So now I'm faced with a huge financial decision that could change the entire course of my photography career, and it all hinges on a single event that I only partially control. So in this video, this is my therapy. I'm going to be walking through some of the options I'm considering at different price points to kind of try to decide what camera brand do I go for. Now I know a lot of photographers are going through a lot of the same things, so I hope going through these options is something that's relevant to you too, and I'll try to point out considerations that hopefully will help you decide for yourself what you need to do. So let's break down some options. What I'm looking for is something to help me do weddings and family portraits, because that's what my business is based on. So I'm looking for something with 2 card slots, preferably full frame. I need a 35, 50, 85 millimeter lenses, extra batteries, and probably new speed lights too, especially if I switch away from Nikon. Now, it would be nice to have a 70 to 200 and something like a 24 to 70 or 24 to 120 like I've got now, but that might be asking too much. Now, the other thing that really complicates this is that I really want to get into like videography, even more so than what I'm doing with these like pretty simple YouTube videos, but doing like wedding videos, because I could be hired on as a second videographer for more money per hour than I could be hired on as a second photographer. So having a camera or buying into a camera system that could help support that would be really good. A huge consideration for this is how easy it is to switch between photo mode and video mode. Like, is it turning the dial 3, 4, 5 times? That's too much. Is it hitting a single switch? That would be good. How long does it take to dump photos to the memory cards in order to start recording a video? So to get started, I'm already looking at Nikon. It will be pretty quick for switching between photo and video, especially with the CF Express card in the Nikon Z6 II. It seems like it would dump photos really quick to that card and then switch to video like really fast. So that would be a big plus there. Starting with the Z6 II and the Z5 are the two camera bodies I'm thinking about. If I get the Z6 II, that'd be my main camera body. The Z5 would be a secondary camera. The Z5 seems like a great choice just to be that secondary camera because it's pretty low in price. You can get it for around $1,000 used, so that makes it a pretty easy pickup compared to like a second A7 IV or a second R6 or something like that, which is way more expensive. Now for lenses, I'm looking at Viltrox. This is so far the only camera brand, lens maker, third party, that seems to make autofocus lenses for the Z mount. I'm not sure why like Tamron and Sigma haven't pulled it off yet, but Viltrox has. But they have a 35, 50, and an 85 that they're even cheaper than the Nikon 35, 50, and 85 are used. Now, from looking at different reviews of the Viltrox lenses, it does seem like I'd be losing out on some of the sharpness and the focusing speed as well. So, I mean, when you buy third party, a lot of times you're gonna lose out in some areas. So if I get those two cameras used and get the third-party Viltrox lenses, plus like extra batteries, grip extensions, those kind of things, I'm looking at maybe $4,500 or so to make that complete switch. That is a lot of money for me, but it is a lot less than Canon and Sony. And I do have a flexible option to kind of stop halfway, like just get one camera and an adapter at a time, then get the other camera and an adapter, then work on the lenses. My speed lights will still work, my 24 to 120 will still work, my 70 to 200 will still work. All of that part will still be pretty good. If I do stop at just the cameras, the adapters, and I think the grip extensions, maybe batteries, I don't remember exactly, that stopping there would just be $3,300, which is way more manageable to be able to stop halfway through and save up money for kind of the next phase. Now the big disadvantage is autofocus, and Canon and Sony seem to have like magical autofocus. Nikon is still lagging behind for, everything that I can read. I don't have hands-on experience with these cameras. The Z9 might be a little different, but That's just so much more expensive. It might as well not exist. If I could afford the Z9, I could afford, you know, 2 A7 IVs or 2 R6s or something. So that it doesn't exist to me. Now, the autofocus thing, it could be a really big issue for video, especially for doing like YouTube videos. I can't like, you know, reach over there and like autofocus or manual focus or whatever. I have to trust the autofocus for video, which makes it a lot tougher. With Sony and Canon, that would be a lot easier to trust that. So let's move on to Canon. I would actually be putting aside a little bit of my full frame preference for this because Canon just came out with the Canon R7, and that looks like a really great option. It's a crop sensor, which kind of sucks in my opinion, but it still like looks like a really good camera, and only $1,500. That is $1,000 less than the Canon R6, a few hundred less than the Z6 II, and also $1,000 less than the Sony a7 IV. It is on pre-order right now, and it's probably not going to be really actually available to get for months for a while. But I wouldn't be ready to buy it for months anyway, so that's probably fine. Before the R7 came out, I was thinking about like getting like a Canon R6 and then like an RP or an R, and that would still be pretty expensive, especially with the R6 being so expensive. And then the R and the RP only have 1 card slot each, so for being a wedding shooter, like that's no brainer. That is not good at all. The other thing with that is getting an R7 and an R6. If I did that, that would be really tough because I actually don't like mixing crop sensor and full frame cameras in one kit. I did that before when I had a D750 and a Nikon D500, and the 500 is a crop sensor camera. And it was really hard just to choose like, what camera do I use for what situation? What lens do I put on which camera? Just the fact that the sensor sizes were 2 different sizes made it a really difficult situation to kind of figure out. But the R7, it looks so good for autofocus and video capability. Photos would probably be pretty good, pretty amazing. I mean, there's not really any bad cameras as far as image quality for photos go anymore. My big concern with it though would be low light performance. Like, is there going to be a lot of grain and noise at high ISO, especially with weddings? A lot of what I do gets into like pretty dark areas like dance floors and stuff like that, where having the flash can only go so much, and you need to like bump up your ISO to 2000, 3200, 6400 to kind of compensate for just the lack of light in these situations. Like, how's a crop sensor going to do with that? My first camera that I started with, a Nikon D7000, that was a crop sensor. And I also had a Nikon D500, which is like a very pro level crop sensor camera. And both of them, I just didn't like how the sensor noise came out. Like, it just did not look good to me. It's really grainy. The Nikon D7000 was really bad. The Nikon D500, not so bad, but still not super great in my opinion. With the Canon, I would be getting the f1.8 lenses, the same as with the Nikons, but the Canon's 1.8s for the RF line don't seem to be as durable or well made or sharp, just not as high performing as Nikon's f1.8s. And now comparing the Canon 1.8s with Viltrox's 1.8s, that's a really difficult thing to judge because I don't know if that there's any videos or examples of how those two things look compared against each other. But it just seems like Canon's 1.8 line is really not as good. Oh, and also using these lenses on a crop sensor camera means that I'm not going to get a full frame look to it. Like the background blur, the bokeh, is going to look more like f2.8, maybe f3.2, something like that, equivalent look on a full frame camera. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. I would be getting the 24, 35, and 50 millimeter Canon lenses. Maybe the 85 if I can swing it for the extra reach, since I won't have a 70 to 200 anymore, but probably that'd be too much, too expensive for that. So without the 85, going with Canon, 2 R7s and the 3 lenses, that'd be around $4,800. So a lot of money, a couple $100 more than the Nikon, which isn't too bad, but a lot less flexibility financially than going with Nikon. And $4,800, way less than the Sony option, tell you that. One big disadvantage with it, besides the lack of financial flexibility, is not being able to use my 24 to 120 or 70 to 200 anymore. I would be able to sell them in that case, obviously, and maybe pick up that 85 or something even wider than a 24 for doing video. But it's just harder to give up the lenses that I already have, knowing that I won't be able to sell them for like a whole lot. The Canon R7 route would be only $4,800, which is pretty cheap compared to Sony or compared to getting an R6 in that kit. But it's still a little bit more than Nikon. And the big downers, of course, is that I wouldn't be able to adapt my old 70-200 or 24-120. I would only have those 3 lenses. I wouldn't have a halfway stopping point at all. I'd have to make the whole switch kind of at once, which would be really hard. But the big plus side is that I would get that amazing, like, magical Canon autofocus for photo and video. And it seems like the R7 would be a lot easier to switch between photo mode and video mode compared to the R6. Because on the R7, I think it's just like one switch like Nikon is. With the R6, you actually had to go to the command dial and go like 3 or 4 clicks or something around to get to video mode. So that made it a lot more difficult to do hybrid coverage with photo and video at the same event. Now, finally, Sony. This is the big one. The Video King, amazing for photos. Definitely the most expensive though, but easy to switch between photo and video on that too. My main choice here would be the Sony a7 IV. My backup camera, my secondary would probably be an a7 III, because you can get those used for $1,500 to $2,000, somewhere in there. Would I much prefer to get 2 a7 IVs than a7 III? Yeah, but with the a7 IV, $2,500. 2 of those is not gonna work for me. Now with Sony, I would not be getting the fancy G Master lenses, obviously. I'd be looking at the f1.8s. So the 35, 50, 85, Sony a7 IV and an a7 III, new speed lights, more batteries. All of that would be coming in at around $5,700. So Nikon is $4,500 with a kind of a flexible stopping point halfway through at around $3,300, I think I figured out. Canon, not a whole lot more, $4,800, but it's an all-in-one jump. And then Sony at $5,700. That's just not going to happen, especially not having to do it all at once. I just would not be able to manage that. Those are the costs, but what money can I put towards actually purchasing something? I figure I can sell my existing kit, that's including the 24-120 and 70-200, all of that together around $3,000 if I can like get a little bit lucky and sell everything for what I think I can get for it. But the big unknown factor is that guitar. Like I'm not a guitar seller person. Like I play guitar casually, but this is the first time like really selling a big instruments kind of a thing like that. And I just don't know exactly what it's going to go for. And that's a big determinant whether I can go between Nikon and Canon. Like it's only a $300 difference, but it's just the flexibility of Nikon, of being able to stop and start wherever I need to go. That really makes a difference, how much that guitar goes for. I think it will go for $2,200. So selling my kit, $3,000, selling the guitar, $2,200. I've got $500 cash that I've got saved up. So all that together, $5,700. Technically enough for the Sony, but that doesn't really take into account tax, which would put it like a lot more than the $5,700. So Sony's just not going to happen, unfortunately. I need to figure out between Canon and Nikon, the 2 classics. Now I do want to talk about a few other considerations besides just spec sheets. Now I gotta say my favorite camera just to hold is the Canon R6. Then after that, Nikon Z6 II. It's fine. It doesn't feel as good to hold as the R6, or not as good to hold as my Nikon D750. It's like the D750 has such a good grip. Like it's really deep. You can curl around it really good. It's like taller from top to bottom, which is important for me because I've got fairly large hands. With the Z6 II, my pinky falls off the bottom, and it kind of makes it really hard to hold on to. With this D750 and the R6, like I can get a good grip with all 4 fingers on the front. So I'm okay with how the Z cameras feel, the Nikon cameras feel, but it's just not as good as what I'd really like. And then the Sony a7 IV, I've never liked Sony grips. Sony's not really a consideration anyway. The a7 IV just doesn't feel good in my hand at all, my opinion. That's how my hands feel. Now something else to consider is just image quality. Now, I know that any of these cameras are gonna have like really great, fantastic image quality, but what I really am nervous about with the Canon R7 being a crop sensor, I don't think it's going to do well in low light. And historically, Canon files have not been like super amazing at being underexposed and then brought up to proper exposure. Nikon files, my D750 files, I feel like I can underexpose them and then bring them back like almost to an infinite degree. Like they just have so much latitude when you underexpose them, even in low light, bringing them back up from there, like they still look really good. Now I do a lot of second shooting for other wedding photographers, and I just don't know how well received having a crop sensor would be. I know that a lot of them really prefer, even require a full frame camera. So at least with them, having a crop sensor camera wouldn't really work out. But if I am looking at videography jobs as a second videographer, like crop sensor's not going to make a difference for them really, because like a lot of wedding videographers, they use even micro four thirds. Full frame is a lot less common in that line of work, so I think a crop sensor would be just fine from that respect. And another big point for the video side is that Nikon is not really super well respected for video, and have done many video, well maybe not many, but a lot of videos with my D750, and it is pretty difficult, especially it's the autofocus. I actually have to use manual focus for a lot of it. That makes a huge difference in the difficulty level. And so Nikon's just not really well known in the videography space. If I go with Nikon, people might kind of look at me like, I don't really want to hire you for this video job because you use Nikon. Whereas Canon, you know, obviously has a huge name in video with the cinema line for sure. And then obviously with like the R6, R7, not R7, R5 I'm thinking of. Like they're well known and pretty well accepted, like really well accepted for video. The Z6 II started to turn that around for Nikon, and especially the Z9 is really pushing Nikon forward in the video space. But that hasn't really risen to a significant level, that big change yet, so it's not something I can really count on. And the last consideration is just how easy is it going to be to switch to any new system? Like I've talked about this a few times before, like Nikon would be the easiest because I can just adapt my existing lenses, which would be great. Right now, as I'm recording this, it's July, the end of July almost, and it's kind of still the middle of family season, family photo season, and wedding photo season. So I can't be stuck like halfway through a transition and not have a usable kit for weddings or for families. Like I need to be ready to take photos pretty much every weekend from here until the end of October almost. So just with how long it takes to sell everything, and I'd be like taking months to make this transition, that really puts the advantage in Nikon's court and makes Canon a little bit more of a hard sell. Of course, this is a temporary problem, and hopefully it would only last, you know, during the off season. So choosing which camera system to buy into based on how long it would take to switch, that's maybe not the right risk assessment kind of deal. So that's where I'm at right now. Middle of prime photo taking season. Just the cost of Sony rules it out, and I can't say that I'm super sad about that. I just want to be able to enjoy picking up my camera. So if it doesn't feel good in my hand, then I won't want to pick it up, and so then I won't want to take photos or do videos quite as much with that. Switching to Canon would be difficult. It includes going to a crop sensor camera. It's slightly more expensive, but the autofocus advantage would probably be huge. I don't have personal experience with any of these autofocus systems, but that would probably be really great. And then just the video features over Nikon also would probably be pretty amazing too. So Nikon, easiest, lowest cost, most flexible options, but I just worry about the autofocus performance. If I'm gonna make a huge financial investment like this, like I wanna be able to get like a really good autofocus system along with it. And just the consideration of maybe not being able to be hired for video jobs because I just don't have the right camera brand. So roast me in the comments. I know there's a lot of opinions, a lot of tribal territory to be defended when talking about switching camera brands. I want to see what you guys think, which is the direction you think I should go. I gotta say, I have no firm decisions between Nikon and Canon. Sony is pretty much a no, but I have not made a huge decision on this yet, and I don't know, this has been like a spiritual struggle for me. Maybe not spiritual, but just like a very big conflict in my head. I'm like thinking all day like Nikon, it's Canon, Nikon, Canon. I just don't know. It's been really tough. So I hope talking through these different options at least helps you think about switching camera systems yourself, if that's something that you're going through. Considerations that you don't always hear about, like how do things feel, how does a camera make you feel on the inside emotionally as well as ergonomically in your hand. Hit like, hit subscribe if it's been helpful in that regard. I'm Dylan with Live Life Creative.